Good evening. It is Wednesday, May 14th, 2014. It is 5:40 PM. It is the monthly meeting of the Urbana Human Relations Commission. Could we please have a roll call?
Francis Rigberg Baker,
Here.
Daniel Larson,
Here.
Lisa Mosley, Peter Resnick,
Here.
Aisha Lam Sobe, Rizwan Udin.
Here.
Looking at the minutes from our April 9th meeting.
We need approval.
Oh, excuse me. I jumped ahead of, sorry, excited. Looking over tonight's agenda. Are there any additions, corrections, edits?
So I'll move that we approve the agenda, moving old business to the end of the agenda between 7 and 8.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Okay, now, looking over the minutes from our April 9th meeting, are there any additions, corrections, edits, or can we move for approval?
Move approval of the minutes.
Seconded.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the same? Next up, public participation. We're light tonight, so let's move on to new business. And we have our EEO compliance review.
Right. Although we have some of the information for AR contractors and services in the packet, they have not submitted their review materials yet, and so I'd like to table that until we actually have review materials for them.
And they are undertaking it. It's just
Yeah.
timing. They haven't gotten to us
Right.
yet.
Do we need to move? Okay. Todd, could we please move to your staff report, please?
Sure. The approval of EEO workforce statistics, the only one that we have is the one that's currently under review. So again, that will be tabled with next week. Moving to the activity report, I'd like to look first at the monthly complaint activity report. You can see we have three substantial contacts in May. Of those, one is a public accommodations case involving race. The complaint has been filed at this point. The other two one was employment based upon race. We had no jurisdiction there. Another was public accommodations. There was no protected class that could have been applied after a long conversation, and so we had no jurisdiction in that issue, although we are helping that individual to identify an appropriate forum and venue for his complaint. Any questions on those? All right, great. Moving to the case status reports, the monthly complaint, the case status report. UC 130101, I'm currently still waiting for contact from the complainant. There's a pending issue that I need answered before we can go forward. UC 130406 has been settled and withdrawn. It was settled with the Illinois Department of Human Rights. UC 130709, we've released the second information request. UC 131010, I need information from the complainant. Basically, I need information verifying the date and circumstances of and state of conviction. There's some discrepancy between what's being reported on public websites and what he is reporting was actually the case. And it's kind of, well, I don't want to go into it too far, but yeah. UC 140201 is a race retaliation case. We're going to receive our initial response on May 23rd, so the respondent has been granted an extension. And then finally, UC 140403 was a national origin case, and actually it's settled today. Any questions on that?
From the previous month, we had those two outstanding cases, one of which began the preliminary
Thank you.
hearing, the
Right,
other
right.
was waiting on it. And there was a finding a probable cause settlement that occurred.
Right.
Do we have that order
We
prepared
just received a withdrawal, and so I need to get the order from the. I need to send it off to Don Jackson to get it from the hearing officer. And once we have that order, I'll bring it to the board.
yet? Excellent.
And there are no new expenditures to report in the budget report.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So next, let's go back, as it was amended, we're going to go back to item 5, which is actually old business. And talk about this vehicle for hire ordinance, recommendation, suggestion, and findings. Todd, anything? Get us started?
Based upon the conversation that we had last month, I tried to draft a motion or a recommendation that basically said that the commission had carefully reviewed the memorandum and agreed with the memorandum's findings that the blanket rule, the blanket exclusionary rule for individuals with convictions has a disparate impact on African Americans and Latinos. However, and so the commission agrees with that portion of the memo and with the memo's findings per se, but does not necessarily, or did not, I forget how I said it, but basically declined to support the recommendations as such. And so I've tried to put that into words in a way that makes sense based upon the conversation that occurred last month. But again, it's subject to review and amendment by the commission.
Peter?
And that's it.
So the only thing that I'd like to change as far as the motion goes, the discussion we had last month was that we as a commission wanted to endorse the idea that the current ordinance has a disparate impact, that it should be changed so as not to have a disparate impact, and that insofar as there is going to be some review, that review should be somehow captured in the ordinance. That is, that they set up a review panel or whatever it is. But in particular, I think the sense of the commission was that we did not want to, as a commission, make mention of that we think it's important in a particular way to worry about the issues of public safety. That was an independent issue. As far as the discrimination issue, that we can address, but as to what to do about public safety, that's in the hands of the city council and something they need to decide and balance and weigh. And I think Todd's memo, while mostly going to the issue of the discrimination issue, does mention the balancing with safety concerns and public safety concerns. And I think and also in the motion, there is a bit about, I believe it's the third or fourth whereas clause, the fourth whereas clause, which makes mention of preserving public health, safety, welfare. And I think, obviously, we all as human beings, as citizens, agree that this is important for the city council to balance, but as a commission, I don't think we want to make mention of it. So I'd be inclined to strike that language and then refer specifically to the language in the memo about the disparate impact and the possibility for review.
Can I just address it before we?
Please.
So with the disparate impact analysis, what you typically have is a rule that's neutral as to an individual's protected class status. And then you have some type of justification for the rule, some type of reason for the rule. Most of the time it's an employer who is looking for good employees for a job, and they say, well, we need everybody to have a high school diploma because we need them to be qualified because we need good qualified workers. That's the reasoning, right? And so in every disparate impact case, what you have to do is you have to take the rule or the rule itself and compare it to the justification for the rule to say whether or not there's really a valid relationship between those two, whether or not it's actually accomplishing that. If you can find, or if there is a disparate impact, right, then the next question is, I should have said that, if you do find that there's a disparate impact upon a particular protected class, then the next part of the analysis, the crucial part of the analysis, is whether or not there's a valid relationship and a strong relationship between the rule and what you're trying to accomplish. And so to say that a rule has a disparate impact without mentioning that justification really brings into question the validity of the conclusion of disparate impact. So one of the reasons I left this in is because it doesn't actually say that the Human Relations Commission is saying that there's a health and safety justification. It's saying that the memo that the Human Relations Office drafted basically has said that there has to be this balancing. I think it's important. I think, first of all, the memo has to mention it because the analysis doesn't make any sense without it. But I think it bears at least consideration of including it in this, because if you don't, then it may look like a crucial question was not actually considered by the commission and by the memo by extension. And so I'll just leave that. It's going to be your motion, so you all decide what you want to do with the wording and whether or not you want to strike something. I just want to be very clear as to why I included it.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Also, the one thing that if the only argument, if the only thing we're saying, the argument to change anything, is disparate impact by itself, that struck me as that I think we have stronger arguments, don't we? Like that's a protected class in Urbana, or other this 4-year thing is not really very well thought out, that kind of thing. So it kind of disappoints me that it just goes back to disparate impact, which is a very important thing to respond to, because it's often a symptom of other problems, and that are basically about that protected classes problems. I mean, yeah. So this idea, though, that there's sort of a little different need for justification. So you find out if there really is a valid reason to do this, or it is just a reflection of racial problems or misogyny or some other problem that we are here to try to do something about.
Yeah, I want to completely agree with what both you and Todd said, and I don't want to remove the idea that the disparate impact is because of the class of the citizens that is having a prior conviction. I mean, it's a disparate impact about a particular feature of them, that, you know, it's disparately impacting African Americans in particular and Hispanic citizens because they are overrepresented in prior conviction, but it's also impacting, well, it's disparately treating, in fact, prior conviction status. The important bit, though, and the distinction that I want to make with what Todd said is you do the analysis and you say, look, we've gone and said that 4 years after conviction status is in order to protect public health and safety. And there is no nexus between the way the rule is written, right, or it's an unbalanced nexus. It doesn't accomplish the task in a reasonable way by simply looking at conviction status. So on that side, we definitely need to say that. It's the flip side that I want to be careful we don't say, which is, therefore, when you come up with a new rule, please do balance public safety by doing these other things. I think Todd is in a position as staff where he can say, in order to make the balance right, you can do these things. I think we want to say the balance is currently wrong, and you have to get it right, and not make a recommendation about how they get it right. We just simply want to say you've gotten the balance of what you think you're doing, public safety, wrong versus what you're doing, which is 4 years after conviction status. That doesn't accomplish the task and has a disparate impact. And I'm not sure how to finesse that into the motion as is. And I see which way, I now understand why, Todd, you put that text in. I think something's necessary in there. You're absolutely right. What I don't want to do is, because currently that fourth whereas clause says, the Human Relations Office's memorandum provides recommendations for amending the provision which seek to preserve public health, safety, and welfare while reducing any disparate impact. The more important point is the inverse. The current state of affairs is that the current ordinance does not accomplish its goal of preserving public health, safety, and welfare, and meanwhile has a disparate impact on African American and Latino applicants.
Peter?
Yes, I'm sorry.
I'm
Todd,
sorry.
please, go right ahead.
One other sort of thing so if you take a look at whereas number 3, it's describing the findings in the memo.
And
Right.
so that will cover.
Whereas number 4 is describing the recommendations, and then whereas number 5 basically says, now that we've sort of described these for you, we're accepting the findings. We're declining to say anything about the recommendations. So 4 is basically in there as a description, as a general broad description of the recommendations to give context to what's going to happen next.
Right.
So as you're amending and as you're reworking the language, just kind of keep that in mind. We still need to, or at least if you follow the same scheme, then it would describe what's going on.
And to the commission, I apologize in advance because I didn't look at this until yesterday. My my work week has been insane, and so I really didn't have a chance to come up with some suggested text, and I hate doing it on the floor. But let me see if I can review for just a moment and see if we can come up with something. So I think we need to start with at least adding a whereas clause to address Fran's comment, which is whereas the current human rights ordinance, we can put a citation, forbids discrimination against people simply on the basis of, or solely on the basis of their prior conviction status, and that the commission, trying to come up with words, wishes to, believes that is an important ideal or something to that effect. Dan, you're the writer among us.
Yeah.
Well, it's the city's ordinance.
Right. Well, okay, so good. So that and the commission believes that it is an important ideal to uphold. Passive voice is exactly right for this particular case.
No agents.
So I do think we want to add that clause.
So we're going to say disparate impact, part of our ordinance, and the current technique to ensure welfare is not accomplished. Those are our arguments. I've-
I'm sorry.
I'm not sure what the commission declines to adopt the aforesaid recommendations
I
actually
think that
means.
overdoes it. I think what we want to say is that the commission declines to take a position on the solution as to how to avoid this disparate impact.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And then the only question is that fourth what is currently the fourth whereas.
Yeah, that could be clear as to what is actually being talked about.
So, I mean, perhaps the answer is to combine those last two whereases. The point of the putting the fourth and the fifth together is what we're declining to make a comment on, which is the preservation of public safety. So perhaps what we want to say is, whereas the Human Relations Commission, sort of start with the fifth, the Human Relations Commission has carefully considered the memorandum and supports its findings,
Take the position.
but declines to make a specific recommendation with regard to accomplishing the goals of preserving
Public health, safety. and
public health, safety, welfare, while reducing disparate impact. And then, does the therefore come out correct? Commission supports the memorandum signing that disparate impact and should be amended to minimize the disparate impact. I think we do want to re-add the bit about the
Sort of depends if you want to, how much you want to emphasize
right
that.
to avoid the disparate treatment of.
Yeah.
So early on, something, whereas section 12-37 of the Urbana Human Rights Ordinance provides that is the intent of the city of Urbana adopting this article to secure an end to the city of discrimination, including but not limited to description by reason of conviction record.
Okay, so
Whereas.
Yes,
good.
because
That paragraph from your memo as a whereas clause, I think, is perfect.
Right. I mean, even if every single person affected by this, all the convicts were white, we still wouldn't like it.
Right.
Okay?
Exactly. So, the whereas language, the language from that paragraph on the first page of your memo as a whereas clause, and then recommends as follows that the commission supports the memorandum's finding that it creates a disparate impact, and that
It inappropriately discriminates against people who have been convicted, or whatever kind of language from the ordinance.
inappropriately discriminates without the desired effect of promoting public safety, something to that effect. So this will be in the conclusion.
So therefore.
That we support the memorandum's findings, that it creates a disparate impact, and that enforcement of Section 2623A3 in its present form, what was the adjective you used? Inappropriately discriminates against persons with prior convictions without promoting, or without promoting the goal, without promoting the goal of preserving
Yeah,
public
the
health.
intended goals.
The intended goal of, yeah. And that section 2632A3 should be amended to minimize that disparate impact and disparate treatment. or those disparate impacts and disparate treatment. And let's see if Todd got it all down, and Tony. The particular language to get the details.
For some reason, and I know exactly why it's there, because there's discrimination that's appropriate. But inappropriate discrimination, typically you're talking about unlawful discrimination, which this isn't.
Inappropriate, so discrimination is.
Well, no, I'm not exactly sure if inappropriate. It's inconsistent with the sort of the intent of the human rights ordinance.
Well, right, except it doesn't apply to the city, so it's not unlawful.
I don't know. What, can I recommend this?
Please.
So, can the commission assign someone to just sort of smith this, and then once they're assigned, if there are any edits or concerns that my office has, I can sort of let them sort of be known and sort of mark those out. I can give this electronically to anybody if you need it in Word form so that we can sort of jump on it.
I mean, it is possible if the four of us are willing, or we can recruit one more, to just announce a special meeting where basically what we do is we come in, sit down, approve it once we're all agreed. It won't take more than 10 minutes if people can come in at any old time. And, you know, it doesn't have to be in front of the camera or anything. We can just get it approved with the text.
Up and
Yes. Because I don't think we want to approve a motion that is still in
No.
flux.
Yeah, and I would, not this much flux.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm certainly happy to volunteer to be one of the reviewers if you need one.
Great. And so we'll get that going.
Thank you, Dan.
Maybe we can do it as early as Friday, and just to knock it out, and then maybe get a very short meeting scheduled for sometime next week. And as long as we have 4.
And it would be great to have it in time for Monday's city council meeting, so if we could, you know,
Although
figure.
we may not be able to notice it up that quickly.
Right.
I'm not exactly, yeah. I'm
Well, it's
not
got to be
exactly sure that-
purely 48 hours, so
Right,
officially
yeah.
we could do it on
Which
Friday.
actually
and
includes Saturday, I think.
Absolutely.
So,
It's not business days. No.
Right.
And, you know, I don't have any compunction about stretching the Open Meetings Act in this particular case. We know exactly what we want to do about this, and the intent is correct.
so yeah, let's sort of get the drafts together by Friday, hash it out, and then we'll notice it up and maybe do a Monday noon meeting or something like that. Just something very quick. I mean, and
5 minutes and out.
Yeah. All right. Great.
Todd, thank you.
I think that's all I have.
Great. All righty. Do we have any announcements for this evening? Otherwise, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.